The unexpected vision. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Ouagadougou as Ibrahim Traoré stood in his modest office, staring at blueprints scattered across his wooden desk. At 34 years old, the young military leader had already shaken the foundations of West African politics, but what lay before him now would challenge everything the world thought they knew about Burkina Faso's capabilities. The papers before him weren't battle plans or political strategies. They were technical drawings for something far more ambitious, a massive industrial complex that would transform his landlocked nation into the world's largest exporter of steam boilers. The idea had come to him during a sleepless night, 3 months earlier, as he wrestled with the question that haunted every leader of resource-rich African nations. How do you break free from the cycle of exporting raw materials only to buy back finished products at 10 times the price? Traoré's fingers traced the intricate designs as his chief engineer, Amadou Sawadogo, explained the technical specifications. The proposed facility would span over 2,000 acres in the Hautes Bassin region, employing advanced metallurgy, techniques that even established industrial powers would envy. What made this project revolutionary wasn't just its scale, but its approach, combining traditional African craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology to create steam boilers that would be both superior in quality and significantly more affordable than anything currently available in the global market. The room fell silent as Traoré's economic advisor, Dr. Fatimata Ouedraogo, presented the financial projections. The numbers were staggering. If successful, this single project could increase Burkina Faso's GDP by 40% within 5 years. More importantly, it would create over 50,000 direct jobs and hundreds of thousands of indirect employment opportunities in a nation where youth unemployment had been a persistent challenge, but the obstacles seemed insurmountable. Burkina Faso had never manufactured anything close to this complexity. The country's industrial base consisted mainly of cotton processing and gold mining, hardly the foundation for producing sophisticated steam boilers that required precision engineering and metallurgical expertise. International experts had already dismissed the project as unrealistic and economically unfeasible when preliminary reports leaked to the press. Traoré's mind wandered to his childhood in the rural village of Mogtado, where his grandmother used to tell stories of ancient African kingdoms that had mastered ironworking long before European colonization. The Kingdom of Nuk, the Great Zimbabwe, the iron-smelting traditions of the Haya people. Africa had a rich history of metallurgy that had been overshadowed by centuries of colonial exploitation and post-independence struggles. The young leader's determination hardened as he remembered his grandmother's words. A tree that wants to grow tall must sink its roots deep into the soil of its ancestors' wisdom. This project would be more than just an industrial venture. It would be a statement to the world that African nations could master any technology, innovate beyond expectations, and compete on equal terms in the global marketplace. As evening approached, Traoré called together his inner circle for what would become known as the Ouagadougou Declaration. In that small room, lit by a single fluorescent bulb, he outlined his vision with the passion of a revolutionary and the precision of an engineer. The steam boiler project would not just be about manufacturing. It would incorporate renewable energy sources, employ sustainable production methods, and serve as a training ground for the next generation of African engineers and technicians. The meeting lasted until dawn, with each participant contributing their expertise to refine the proposal. Military logistics would ensure security and transportation efficiency. Educational partnerships would guarantee a skilled workforce. Regional cooperation would secure both raw materials and market access across West Africa and beyond. By sunrise, the blueprint for what would become the most ambitious industrial project in modern African history was complete. Traoré signed the authorization documents as the first rays of light filtered through his office windows, officially launching what skeptics called an impossible dream, and supporters hailed as a masterstroke of economic nationalism. Within hours, news of the project spread across the continent and beyond. International media outlets struggled to comprehend how a small, landlocked African nation with limited industrial experience, could even contemplate such an undertaking. Financial analysts in London and New York questioned the feasibility studies. European boiler manufacturers dismissed the threat to their market dominance with patronizing comments about unrealistic African ambitions. But in the villages and towns of Burkina Faso, something extraordinary was happening. Young people who had been preparing to migrate to Europe in search of opportunities began reconsidering their plans. Engineers working for foreign companies started submitting applications to return home. The project had ignited something more powerful than any political movement: hope for genuine economic independence. Traoré understood that announcing the project was the easy part. The real challenge would be transforming this vision into reality, while navigating international pressure, securing funding, and building an entirely new industrial ecosystem from scratch. As he prepared for the battles ahead, he carried with him the unwavering belief that Burkina Faso's time had come to surprise the world once again. Building the impossible. The skepticism was immediate and overwhelming. Within 48 hours of Traoré's announcement, major international newspapers had published scathing editorials questioning the project's viability. The Financial Times called it an expensive fantasy, while German industrial publications mocked the idea that Burkina Faso could challenge their centuries-old boiler manufacturing supremacy. These criticisms only strengthened Traoré's resolve. He knew that every revolutionary idea faced ridicule before acceptance, and he was prepared for the long journey ahead. The first challenge was securing the massive funding required, an estimated $3 billion for the complete industrial, complex equipment and infrastructure development. Traditional international lenders showed little interest. The World Bank requested feasibility studies that would take 3 years to complete, while the International Monetary Fund suggested focusing on agricultural improvements instead. European development banks offered conditional loans with interest rates that would have crippled the project before it began. Traoré realized he needed to think beyond conventional financing methods. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Chen Wei, a Chinese industrial engineer who had been quietly observing African development projects, approached Traoré's team with a proposal that would change everything. China's Belt and Road Initiative was looking for innovative partnerships in Africa, and the steam boiler project aligned perfectly with their strategic vision for global industrial cooperation. The negotiations in Beijing lasted 2 weeks, with Traoré personally leading the Burkina delegation. The Chinese were impressed by the technical sophistication of the project plans and the comprehensive market analysis prepared by Traoré's team. More importantly, they recognized the geopolitical significance of supporting an African nation's bid for industrial independence. The agreement signed in the Great Hall of the People was unprecedented in its scope. China would provide 60% of the funding through low-interest loans, technical expertise from their leading boiler manufacturers, and access to advanced metallurgical equipment. In return, Burkina Faso would share technological innovations developed during the project and guarantee preferential access to African markets for Chinese industrial equipment. Back in Ouagadougou, the real work began. The chosen site in Bobo-Dioulasso required massive infrastructure development. Roads capable of handling heavy industrial equipment needed construction. A dedicated power plant using locally available solar and biomass resources had to be built. Most challenging of all, a completely new railway connection to the ports in Côte d'Ivoire was essential for importing raw materials and exporting finished products. Traoré's approach to workforce development was as revolutionary as the project itself. Rather than hiring foreign experts to run the operation, he established the Burkina Faso Institute of Advanced Metallurgy, partnering with universities in China, Germany, and South Africa to train local engineers and technicians. The program attracted brilliant young minds from across West Africa, creating a brain gain effect that reversed decades of talent migration to Europe and North America. The environmental considerations were equally innovative. Traditional steam boiler manufacturing was notorious for its carbon footprint and waste production. Traoré's team developed a production process that used solar thermal energy for metal heating, recycled water systems for cooling, and locally sourced biofuels for auxiliary power. The factory would actually generate more clean energy than it consumed, selling surplus electricity to neighboring countries. International pressure intensified as construction began. European manufacturers, threatened by potential competition, lobbied their governments to impose trade restrictions on Burkina Faso industrial products. The French government, historically dominant in West African affairs, privately expressed concerns about the project's implications for regional stability and European commercial interests. These challenges only motivated the workforce more. Construction crews worked around the clock, often singing traditional songs that echoed across the building site. Local suppliers ramped up production of cement, steel reinforcements, and other materials, creating a ripple effect throughout the regional economy. What had started as one factory project was becoming an industrial revolution. The technical challenges were formidable. Steam boilers require precision manufacturing tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. The metallurgy must withstand extreme pressures and temperatures while maintaining efficiency over decades of operation. Quality control systems need to exceed international standards to compete in global markets. Amadou Sawadogo, the chief engineer, spent months in Shanghai and Munich, learning from the world's best boiler manufacturers while adapting their techniques to African conditions and resources. His team developed innovative approaches that combined traditional African metalworking knowledge with modern industrial processes, creating production methods that were both efficient and culturally authentic. The first major milestone came 8 months after construction began. The main production hall, a cathedral-like structure spanning 15 acres, was completed ahead of schedule and under budget. International observers who had dismissed the project as impossible began taking notice when German engineering consultants confirmed that the facility met world-class industrial standards. As the installation of manufacturing equipment began, orders for Burkina Faso steam boilers started arriving from unexpected sources. A major Ethiopian industrial development project requested a preliminary quote. Nigerian oil refineries inquired about customized high-pressure systems. Even European companies, impressed by the technical specifications and competitive pricing, began considering Burkina Faso as a potential supplier. Traoré stood in the completed factory hall on a warm evening in March, watching as the first production line machinery was calibrated for initial testing. The impossible was becoming reality, one precisely manufactured component at a time. The young leader who had dared to dream of industrial independence was witnessing the birth of a new chapter in African economic history, the first success. The tension in the factory was electric as teams of engineers prepared for the most critical moment in the project's history. After 18 months of construction and preparation, the first Burkina Faso steam boiler was ready for its maiden test. The massive steel cylinder, gleaming under the industrial lights, represented far more than manufactured equipment. It embodied the dreams and aspirations of an entire nation. Traoré arrived at the facility before dawn, unable to sleep as the testing day approached. He found Amadou Sawadogo already there, running final diagnostics on the monitoring systems. The chief engineer's hands trembled slightly as he checked pressure gauges and temperature sensors, knowing that the eyes of the world would soon be upon their creation. International observers had gathered for the test, including representatives from major European boiler manufacturers who remained skeptical about African industrial capabilities. Technical journalists from Germany, China, and the United States mingled with African development experts and potential customers from across the continent. The atmosphere was charged with curiosity, doubt, and anticipation. Dr. Elena Kowalski, a renowned Polish steam boiler expert hired as an independent assessor, supervised the testing protocols. Her reputation for uncompromising technical standards had made her the ideal choice to validate the quality of Burkina Faso's industrial achievement. If the boiler passed her rigorous examinations, international acceptance would follow. The testing process began at precisely 9 o'clock in the morning. Steam pressure was gradually increased while dozens of sensors monitored every aspect of the boiler's performance. Temperature readings, stress measurements, Efficiency calculations and safety system responses were recorded and analyzed in real time by computer systems that rivaled those used in the most advanced manufacturing facilities worldwide. As pressure reached the first critical threshold, a collective breath was held throughout the observation deck. European engineers who had privately bet against the project's success found themselves leaning forward, genuinely impressed by the precision of the Burkina Faso manufacturing. The boiler's performance exceeded design specifications, operating with an efficiency rating that surpassed many established European models. The breakthrough moment came during the third hour of testing. Dr. Kowalski's instruments detected something extraordinary. The Burkina Faso boiler was not only meeting international standards but was actually outperforming comparable units manufactured by leading German and Italian companies. The innovative metallurgy techniques developed by Sawadogo's team had created a superior product that combined durability, efficiency, and reliability in ways that traditional manufacturers had never achieved. Word of the successful test spread rapidly across social media and international news networks. Young Burkina Faso engineers celebrated in the streets of Ouagadougou, while their counterparts in other African capitals began inquiring about similar industrial development opportunities. The psychological impact was profound. If Burkina Faso could master steam boiler manufacturing, what other technological challenges could African nations overcome? The economic implications became clear within days of the successful test. Ghana's Ministry of Energy placed the first official order for 50 industrial steam boilers to support their expanding manufacturing sector. Kenya's Geothermal Development Authority requested customized units for their renewable energy projects. Even more remarkably, a consortium of Canadian mining companies approached Traoré's team about supplying specialized high-pressure boilers for their African operations. These early orders validated the market research that had driven the project from its inception. The global steam boiler market was worth over $15 billion annually, dominated by established manufacturers who had become complacent about innovation and pricing. Burkina Faso's entry into this market offered customers a compelling alternative, superior technology at competitive prices, supported by a commitment to customer service and technical innovation. Production ramped up quickly as additional orders arrived. The factory's modular design allowed for rapid scaling, with new production lines coming online every few months. Employment grew from the initial 500 workers to over 3,000 within 6 months of the first successful test. Local suppliers expanded their operations to meet the growing demand for raw materials and components. The ripple effects extended throughout West African economies. Burkina Faso's success inspired similar industrial projects in neighboring countries. Senegal announced plans for a precision machinery manufacturing facility. Mali began developing its own metallurgy institute. Niger started discussions about mineral processing equipment production. The vision of African industrial independence was spreading across the continent like wildfire. International recognition followed commercial success. The United Nations Industrial Development Organization invited Traoré to present the Burkina Faso model at their annual conference in Vienna. MIT's business school developed a case study on the project's innovative financing and workforce development strategies. Chinese industrial planners incorporated lessons learned from the steam boiler project into their own domestic manufacturing initiatives. Perhaps most significantly, the success challenged fundamental assumptions about African economic development. For decades, international development theories had emphasized agriculture, mining, and basic manufacturing as appropriate sectors for African nations. The steam boiler project demonstrated that African countries could compete in sophisticated, technology-intensive industries that required advanced engineering and precision manufacturing. The transformation of Burkina Faso's international image was dramatic. The country that had been known primarily for cotton exports and political instability was now recognized as an emerging industrial powerhouse. Foreign direct investment inquiries poured in from companies seeking to establish manufacturing partnerships. Technical universities from around the world proposed collaborative research programs. Traoré remained focused on the bigger picture as congratulations and accolades arrived from around the world. The steam boiler project was succeeding beyond his wildest expectations, but he knew that true economic transformation required sustained effort and continuous innovation. The first success had proven that the impossible was possible. Now came the greater challenge of maintaining excellence while scaling up to become the world's largest steam boiler exporter. Standing in the factory as the 10th boiler rolled off the production line, Traoré allowed himself a moment of pride. His grandmother's stories about ancient African metallurgy had inspired a modern industrial revolution. The roots had indeed grown deep, and now the tree was reaching toward the sky. Global recognition. The invitation arrived on elegant diplomatic letterhead from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. Chancellor Olaf Scholz personally requested Traoré's presence at the Hamburg Industrial Summit, where the Burkina Faso steam boiler project would be featured as a case study in innovative industrial development. It was a remarkable reversal for a European nation, whose media had initially dismissed the African venture as unrealistic. The transformation in international perception had been swift and decisive. Within 1 year of the first successful production test, Burkina Faso had delivered over 800 steam boilers to customers across 4 continents. Quality certifications from Lloyd's of London, TÜV in Germany, and the American Society of Mechanical Engineers had validated the technical excellence of Burkina Faso manufacturing. More importantly, customer satisfaction ratings consistently exceeded 95%, with many clients praising both product quality and after-sales service. The Hamburg Summit would mark Traoré's most significant international appearance since launching the steam boiler project. As his aircraft descended over the bustling German port city, he reflected on the journey that had brought a young African leader to address some of the world's most powerful industrial executives and government officials. The conference hall was packed beyond capacity, with over 2,000 attendees representing major corporations, development agencies, and government ministries from 60 countries. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as delegates discussed the Burkina Faso phenomenon that had disrupted traditional assumptions about global manufacturing capabilities. Dr. Heinrich Müller, CEO of Germany's largest industrial conglomerate, introduced Traoré with words that would have been unimaginable just 2 years earlier. Today we welcome a visionary leader who has demonstrated that innovation, determination, and strategic thinking can overcome any geographical or economic disadvantage. President Traoré has not only built a successful industrial enterprise but has redefined what is possible for developing nations in the 21st century. Traoré's presentation was masterful in its simplicity and power. He began not with technical specifications or production statistics, but with the story of his grandmother's tales about ancient African metallurgy. The audience listened in rapt attention as he connected historical African industrial achievements with modern technological capabilities, making the case that his country's success was not an anomaly, but a return to Africa's rightful place in global manufacturing. The technical presentation that followed was equally impressive. Amadou Sawadogo, now recognized as one of the world's leading steam boiler engineers, demonstrated the innovative design features that had made Burkina Faso boilers superior to traditional European models. Advanced materials, science, precision manufacturing techniques, and revolutionary energy efficiency systems had been combined with traditional African craftsmanship to create products that were both technically superior and culturally authentic. The economic impact data presented by Dr. Fatoumata Ouedraogo stunned the international audience. The steam boiler project had generated over $2 billion in export revenue during its first operational year. Employment in Burkina Faso's industrial sector had increased by 400%. Most remarkably, the project had triggered a wave of technological innovation across West Africa, with 17 similar industrial ventures launched in neighboring countries. The question and answer session revealed the depth of international interest in replicating the Burkina Faso model. Brazilian industrialists inquired about technology, transfer agreements. Indian manufacturing associations sought partnerships for precision engineering projects. African Union representatives discussed continental industrial integration strategies based on Burkina Faso's experience. The most significant moment came when Zhang Wei, China's Deputy Minister of Industry and Information Technology, announced a $5 billion expansion of the Belt and Road Initiative, specifically focused on African industrial development projects modeled on Burkina Faso's success. The announcement represented the largest single commitment to African industrialization in modern history. European reactions were more complex but equally significant. Initially skeptical about African industrial capabilities, major European corporations now recognize Burkina Faso as a formidable competitor and potential partner. Siemens announced a joint venture for advanced manufacturing equipment development. ThyssenKrupp proposed a strategic alliance for steel processing technology. French industrial giants, despite their government's initial opposition, quietly approached Traoré's team about collaboration opportunities. The summit's most memorable moment occurred during the closing ceremony. The International Organization for Standardization presented Burkina Faso with its first-ever Excellence in Industrial Innovation Award, recognizing the steam boiler project's contribution to global manufacturing advancement. As Traoré accepted the Crystal Trophy, the standing ovation from 2,000 of the world's most influential industrial leaders lasted over 5 minutes. Media coverage of the Hamburg summit was unprecedented for an African industrial story. The Financial Times published a front-page analysis titled, "The African Industrial Revolution: How Burkina Faso Changed the Game." CNN International produced a documentary special on the steam boiler project's global impact. The Economist featured Traoré on its cover with the headline, "The Engineer President, Africa's New Industrial Pioneer." The recognition extended beyond business and media circles. Harvard Business School invited Traoré to deliver the keynote address at their annual entrepreneurship conference. Oxford University offered him an honorary doctorate in engineering science. The World Economic Forum appointed him as a global leader for tomorrow, focusing on sustainable industrial development. Perhaps most significantly, the African Union designated the Burkina Faso steam boiler project as the flagship initiative for its Agenda 2063 industrial transformation goals. Other African leaders began visiting Ouagadougou to study the project's implementation strategies, workforce development programs, and international partnership models. The psychological impact on African youth was profound. Engineering programs at universities across the continent reported unprecedented enrollment increases. Young African entrepreneurs launched technology startups inspired by Burkina Faso's success. The narrative of African industrial capability had fundamentally shifted from skepticism to celebration. As Traoré's aircraft departed Hamburg, carrying him home to Burkina Faso, he carried with him more than international recognition and business partnerships. He had helped transform global perceptions about African potential and demonstrated that visionary leadership, combined with strategic thinking and technical excellence, could overcome any obstacle. The young leader who had once stared at blueprints in his modest Ouagadougou office was now recognized as one of the world's most innovative industrial pioneers. The impossible dream had become a celebrated reality, inspiring a new generation of African leaders to reach for achievements that the world had deemed unattainable. Becoming the world leader, the statistics were undeniable and historic. By the end of its second operational year, Burkina Faso's steam boiler manufacturing complex had achieved something that international experts had considered impossible. It had become the world's largest exporter of industrial steam boilers, surpassing Germany's century-long dominance in the sector. The milestone was officially confirmed by the International Trade Statistics Organization during their annual manufacturing report release. Burkina Faso had exported over 15,000 steam boilers to 87 countries, generating $4.2 billion in revenue and capturing 28% of the global market share. The transformation from a landlocked African nation, known primarily for cotton and gold exports, to the world's premier steam boiler manufacturer had taken less than 3 years. Traoré received the news while touring the expanded production facility in Bobo Dioulasso, which now sprawled across 5,000 acres and employed over 20,000 workers directly, with an additional 50,000 jobs created in supporting industries throughout West Africa. The factory operated 24 hours a day, with 3 full production shifts manufacturing boilers for customers ranging from small African businesses to major multinational corporations. The secret to Burkina Faso's unprecedented success lay in a combination of factors that traditional manufacturing powers had failed to anticipate. The innovative production methods developed by Amadou Sawadogo's engineering team had achieved efficiency levels that were 30% higher than conventional manufacturing processes. Advanced metallurgy techniques developed through partnerships with Chinese researchers and traditional African metalworkers had created steam boilers with durability and performance characteristics that exceeded anything available from European or American manufacturers. Equally important was the pricing strategy that had disrupted the entire industry. By leveraging lower labor costs, efficient supply chain management, and innovative manufacturing processes, Burkina Faso could offer premium quality steam boilers at prices that were 40% below European competitors. This competitive advantage had opened markets across Africa, Asia, and Latin America that had previously been inaccessible due to the high cost of European equipment. The workforce development program had exceeded all expectations. The Burkina Faso Institute of Advanced Metallurgy had graduated over 3,000 engineers and technicians, many of whom had received additional training in Germany, China, and South Africa. These highly skilled professionals formed the backbone of an industrial ecosystem that was attracting investment and talent from across the continent. International recognition of Burkina Faso's achievement came from unexpected quarters. The German Engineering Federation, whose members had initially dismissed the African project, issued a formal statement acknowledging Burkina Faso's technological leadership in steam boiler manufacturing. Japanese industrial conglomerates, renowned for their precision manufacturing expertise, established research partnerships with Burkinabe companies to learn from their innovative production methods. The geopolitical implications were profound. Burkina Faso's industrial success had shifted the balance of economic power in West Africa, with the country becoming a regional hub for manufacturing and technology transfer. The Ouagadougou Industrial Corridor, a 200-kilometer zone of factories and research facilities, attracted companies from across the globe seeking to establish manufacturing operations in Africa's newest industrial powerhouse. The success triggered a wave of similar projects across the continent. Nigeria announced a $10 billion industrial modernization program based on the Burkina Faso model. Ethiopia launched an advanced textiles manufacturing initiative using similar workforce development and technology transfer strategies. Kenya began construction of a precision machinery manufacturing complex designed by the same engineering team that had built the steam boiler factory. Customer testimonials validated the technical superiority of Burkinabe steam boilers. Major European power plants reported efficiency improvements of 15% after installing equipment manufactured in Burkina Faso. Asian industrial facilities praised the reliability and durability of African-made boilers, with some units operating continuously for over 2 years without maintenance issues. Even American companies traditionally skeptical of non-domestic industrial equipment began specifying Burkinabe steam boilers for their international operations. The environmental advantages of the Burkina Faso manufacturing process had become another competitive differentiator. The solar-powered production facility generated zero carbon emissions while maintaining the highest quality standards. Water recycling systems, biomass energy utilization, and waste reduction programs had created a manufacturing model that was both economically viable and environmentally sustainable. International environmental organizations recognized the steam boiler project as a demonstration that industrial development and ecological responsibility were compatible objectives. Traoré's leadership during this period of explosive growth was crucial to maintaining quality and managing success responsibly. He resisted pressure to expand production too rapidly, insisting that quality standards remain uncompromised even as demand far exceeded supply capacity. His decision to reinvest 60% of profits into research and development, workforce training, and infrastructure improvement ensured that Burkina Faso's competitive advantages would be sustainable over the long term. The cultural impact of becoming the world's largest steam boiler exporter transformed Burkina Faso's national identity. Young people who had previously seen emigration as their only path to prosperity now competed for positions in the expanding industrial sector. Universities reported massive increases in engineering enrollment, with students from across Africa applying for admission to Burkina Faso technical programs. International partnerships multiplied as Burkina Faso's industrial expertise became globally recognized. The European Union established a technology cooperation agreement focused on sustainable manufacturing practices. ASEAN countries initiated a comprehensive trade partnership that included technology transfer and joint research programs. Even the United States, initially skeptical about African industrial capabilities, opened trade negotiations for accessing Burkina Faso steam boiler technology for American infrastructure projects. The financial markets reflected this transformation. In Burkina Faso's economic prospects, international credit rating agencies upgraded the country's sovereign debt rating to investment grade for the first time in its history. Foreign direct investment flowed into supporting industries, with companies establishing operations to supply components, services, and logistics support for the booming steam boiler manufacturing sector. As Traoré stood on the observation deck of the main production facility, watching the latest shipment of steam boilers being loaded onto trucks bound for the port in Abidjan, he reflected on the magnitude of what had been achieved. 3 years earlier, skeptics had dismissed his vision as impossible. Now, Burkina Faso had not only proven them wrong, but had fundamentally altered global perceptions about African industrial potential. The young leader who had dared to dream of economic independence had created something far greater than a successful business venture. He had demonstrated that African nations could master any technology, compete in any market, and lead in any industry when vision, determination, and strategic thinking were combined with the continent's abundant human and natural resources. Shaking the phone call came at 3 a.m, Ouagadougou time. Christine Lagarde, president of the European Central Bank, was personally requesting an emergency meeting with Ibrahim Traoré to discuss what European financial analysts were calling the Burkina Faso disruption, the unprecedented economic impact of a small African nation's industrial success on global manufacturing patterns and international trade flows. The numbers that had prompted this extraordinary diplomatic outreach were staggering. In its third year of operation, Burkina Faso's steam boiler manufacturing had captured 45% of the global market, forcing major European manufacturers to restructure their operations and rethink their competitive strategies. German boiler production had declined by 30%. Italian manufacturers were closing factories that had operated for over a century. The entire European industrial landscape was being reshaped by competition from a nation that most Europeans could not have located on a map just 5 years earlier. The World Trade Organization's latest report confirmed what industry observers had been witnessing. Burkina Faso had fundamentally altered global manufacturing dynamics in ways that economists were still struggling to understand. The country's success had triggered what researchers termed the African Industrial Renaissance, with 17 African nations launching similar high-technology manufacturing projects based on the Burkina Faso model. The ripple effects extended far beyond steam boiler manufacturing. International shipping companies had established new routes connecting West African ports to global markets. Logistics firms were investing billions in African infrastructure to support expanding industrial exports. Financial institutions were developing new investment products focused on African industrial development opportunities. The psychological impact was equally profound. For the first time since the colonial era, African technological innovation was influencing global industrial practices. Major European and American universities were sending research teams to Burkina Faso to study the advanced metallurgy techniques developed by Amadou Sawadogo's engineers. Manufacturing conferences worldwide featured presentations on the Burkina Faso approach to precision engineering and sustainable industrial production. The meeting with Christine Lagarde took place in Geneva, at the headquarters of the World Trade Organization. The European delegation included representatives from Germany's largest industrial conglomerates, French government trade officials, and Italian manufacturing associations. Their message was complex but clear. Burkina Faso's success was forcing a fundamental reevaluation of global economic relationships. Traoré listened carefully as European officials outlined their concerns and proposals. The success of African industrial development was creating new competitive pressures that traditional manufacturing powers were struggling to address. However, rather than seeking to limit African progress, the Europeans were proposing unprecedented cooperation agreements that would benefit all parties involved. The proposed partnership was revolutionary in its scope and implications. European companies would provide access to their most advanced manufacturing technologies in exchange for participation in African industrial development projects. Research and development would be conducted jointly, combining European technical expertise with African innovation and cost advantages. Most significantly, European governments would support African industrial exports through preferential trade agreements and reduced tariffs. The Chinese delegation's presence at the Geneva meeting added another layer of complexity to the negotiations. China's Belt and Road Initiative had been instrumental in Burkina Faso's initial success, and Chinese officials were determined to maintain their strategic partnership with Africa's emerging industrial powers. The discussions evolved into trilateral negotiations that would reshape global economic relationships for decades to come. The agreement reached in Geneva represented a new paradigm for international economic cooperation. The Ouagadougou Accords, named in honor of Burkina Faso's capital, established principles for technology sharing, joint research initiatives, and equitable market access that prioritized mutual benefit over traditional competitive advantages. European technology would be combined with African innovation and Chinese manufacturing scale to create industrial capabilities that no single region could achieve independently. The signing ceremony was broadcast live across 3 continents, with simultaneous translations into 15 languages. As Traoré signed the historic agreement, he was accompanied by heads of state from 12 African nations, demonstrating the continental significance of Burkina Faso's achievement. The young leader, who had started with a vision of steam boiler manufacturing, had created a framework for African industrial transformation on a scale that exceeded even his most ambitious dreams. The immediate impact of the accords was visible within months. European automotive companies began establishing partnerships with African manufacturers to produce components for global markets. Chinese technology firms opened research centers in West Africa, focused on developing industrial innovations for tropical environments. American companies, initially absent from the negotiations, scrambled to establish their own partnerships with African industrial enterprises. The transformation of Burkina Faso itself continued to accelerate. The country now exported not only steam boilers but also precision machinery, advanced metallurgy equipment, and industrial engineering services to customers worldwide. The Ouagadougou Industrial Corridor had become one of Africa's most important manufacturing centers, attracting investment and talent from around the globe. International recognition reached its pinnacle when the Nobel Committee awarded Traoré the Nobel Peace Prize for his contribution to international cooperation and sustainable development. The citation specifically mentioned his role in demonstrating that economic development and international collaboration